Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a plunge into one of the most compelling and, I think, ambitious arguments we've ever covered. We're setting aside the daily news, the political noise, and we're asking a really fundamental question. What is consciousness? And maybe more importantly, what does our own capacity for thought, for abstract reason, actually prove?
It's a huge question.
It is. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore excerpts from a philosophical text. It's called The Intellectual Echo, Consciousness as Evidence of Divine Origin. And it presents this really profound concept that the human mind, our intelligence, it isn't just some biological accident, it's a reverberation, an echo of a greater original intelligence.
And what's crucial to understand right up front is the methodology here. The authors are very explicitly trying to approach this not just from a place of faith, but through, rigorous philosophical and even scientific logic.
Right.
They argue that if you observe a phenomenon, and let's be honest, human consciousness is a striking phenomenon, you have to follow the evidence to its most logical sufficient cause.
Okay, so it's an evidence-based approach.
Exactly. And to frame this, the source uses this analogy that it really sticks with you. Think about the Big Bang. We weren't there. We didn't see the universe begin,
Of course not.
but we know it happened. And we know, because of the cosmic microwave background radiation, that faint residual heat that's everywhere. That's the physical signature. That's the echo, proving a massive hot beginning.
Right, it's the radiation that proves the genesis.
Precisely. And the source argues that human self-awareness is the intellectual radiation. Just as the CMBR is the residual heat proving the Big Bang, our capacity for reason is the intellectual echo proving a conscious and intelligent source. We're observing a reason and deducing the nature of its sufficient cause.
Okay, let's unpack that methodological bridge because that's a big leap for some. The argument starts with a universe of, well, what they call dead matter, non-conscious particles. Then, billions of years later, suddenly out of this material emerges a creature that can write poetry, that can calculate astrophysics and, contemplate its own existence. Why is that emergence such a problem for the source?
It's a problem of causality, and the authors draw a very, very strict line here. They insist on the parallel to cosmology. I mean, we accept the Big Bang conclusion because the echoes, the expansion of the universe, the CMBR, are the only logical consequences of that initial event. The cause has to be sufficient to produce the effect.
Okay.
So if the universe is fundamentally non-conscious, how can consciousness emerge from it? The source really treats consciousness as this anomaly in the causal chain of material existence. It's an effect that requires a cause that is greater than the material itself.
And that transitions us right into the core philosophical proof of the whole work.
It does.
And here is where we leave that physical echo of the CMBR and we move into the necessary logic that underpins the source, this requirement for a sufficient cause. If we accept that we're conscious, the authors demand that we identify a cause for it that is, at the very least, equally conscious.
They lean very heavily on the principle of sufficient reason, or PSR. It's a foundational concept in metaphysics.
Can you break that down?
Sure. Simply put, it just says that everything that exists must have a reason or a cause for its existence. And crucially, that cause must be adequate to explain the effect.
Okay, so the cause has to have what it takes to produce the effect.
Exactly. And the central dilemma posed by the source is this. If the cause is purely material, non-conscious, non-rational particles, how can the effect possess qualities like consciousness, reason, morality, qualities that are completely absent in the cause?
It's the idea that you can't get an apple from an orange tree.
You can't pull an apple of self-awareness out of an orange of inert matter. That's the core of it.
But wait a minute, I know what the skeptical listener is thinking right now. The scientific materialist would argue that consciousness is just an emergent property. It doesn't come from nothing. It emerges from highly complex biological organization, like the brain.
Right.
The complexity of the parts, when they're arranged just so, creates consciousness. How does the source navigate that argument?
That is the exact challenge the source directly confronts. And they concede that complexity is necessary, of course, but they argue it's not sufficient.
What's the difference?
Well, a complex machine, like a computer, can perform calculations. But that doesn't mean the machine understands the calculation, or that the silicon and metal itself has the capacity for understanding.
Okay.
And this is where they introduce the concept of the antecedent source. The argument asserts that for the universe to produce a creature in the shape of humanity, of being capable of, say, complex math and moral judgment, it's a logical necessity that the capacity for intelligence must predate the physical structures, like the brain, that execute it.
So the blueprints for reason have to exist before the physical structure is built.
That's the idea. The ability to even contain a concept like infinity must itself be rooted in something infinite.
Wow, that's a huge paradigm shift.
Yeah.
So instead of the brain creating intelligence,
Well,
the intelligence is the necessary precondition that allows a brain to evolve into a structure that's capable of reflecting it.
precisely. And the relationship between the two is, I think, beautifully illustrated by what they call the mirror effect.
Okay.
Our intelligence is finite. It's limited by time, by biology, by our senses. We are imperfect, we're derivative, and we're temporary.
The reflection in the mirror.
Exactly. If humanity acts as a mirror, our intelligence is simply the reflection. And the existence of that reflection, even if it's a broken or a distorted one, logically proves the existence of the infinite boundless object being reflected.
So the limited nature of the echo only emphasizes the absolute nature of the source.
Yes.
That makes the philosophical argument within its own premises very airtight. But at this point, we've only established that a necessary intelligence must exist. We haven't identified it.
Right.
And this is where the source material transitions and introduces the specific grounding using the Quranic frame. It uses it as an evidence set to define the attributes of that conscious creator.
Exactly. Having established this logical requirement for an intelligent cause, the authors then turn to revelation to define the character and the name of that cause. They ground the argument in the concept of supreme design.
Where do they point to specifically?
They reference Surah At-Tin, specifically verses 4 and 5. Indeed, we have created the human being in the best design, then we turn him to the lowest of low.
The best design. What does the source say that means?
Well, the source material interprets best design, or asani taqwim, as something much more than just our physical structure. It's the exquisite and sophisticated architecture of the human psyche. Our intellect, our moral sense, our capacity for seeking the transcendent, this ability for moral and intellectual growth is seen as the highest form of evidence for deliberate, intentional design.
So the ultimate proof of this divine design is our ability to think beyond just our basic needs, to contemplate the nature of reality, to seek justice, to create art.
Yes.
The fact that a contingent, time-bound creature can ask eternal questions, that's the sign.
That is the ayah, the sign that points back to a reality that is not time-bound or contingent.
Yeah.
And the second half of that verse, then we turn him to the lowest of low, that reinforces the dichotomy.
How so?
The moment we forget that transcendent origin and we restrict our focus only to the material, we become, functionally equivalent to non-conscious matter. The design is in the potential for transcendence.
This inherent discrepancy, our biological temporality versus our intellectual infinity, that's the key evidence. It can't be self-generated. So how does the source define the absolute reality that is self-generated and infinite?
They introduce the concept of the uncaused cause. And for that, they cite the central verse of the Quran, Ayat al-Kursi. Allah, there is no deity except Him, the ever-living, the self-sustaining, Al-Qayyum. And this provides the necessary attributes to satisfy all those philosophical requirements we established earlier.
That's a huge moment in the text. You go from philosophical necessity to revealed identity. Let's focus on the rational grounding of Al-Qayyum. It translates as the self-sustaining, or the necessary existence. Why is that concept rationally required by the principle of sufficient reason?
Because if the first cause of consciousness itself needed a prior cause, we would face an infinite regress of causes.
The never-ending chain.
A never-ending chain, meaning nothing would ever actually start, and thus we wouldn't exist. To break that chain, the first cause must be self-sustaining. It has to be the only entity that doesn't rely on an external factor for its own existence.
Okay.
And we have to contrast divine intelligence, which is personified by Al-Qayyum, with our human intelligence. Our consciousness is dependent. It's dependent on blood flow, neurotransmitters, sleep, oxygen.
You take any of those away.
And the reflection is gone. The source intelligence, however, is independent and absolute. It doesn't rely on chemistry or biology or the physical laws that it created.
So the idea is that by being ever-living and self-sustaining, the creator sits deliberately beyond the causal loop. He is not some gigantic, complex biological machine within the universe.
Not at all.
He is the necessary intelligence that originated and sustains the laws of physics, of time, and of space.
Exactly. If the source were subject to time, the source would be contingent, and then it would require a prior cause, which just leads us back to that contradiction. The entire argument is structured to prove that the ultimate reality must be eternal and absolute.
The intelligent ground state of existence.
Right. And our ability to process information is just a limited borrowing of that absolute capacity.
The coherence of the source is what's really so captivating here. It argues that by analyzing these echoes of design within our own capacity for thought, our reason, our search for meaning, our moral code, we are forced to the logical conclusion that we are not an accidental complexity.
Mhm.
We are a deliberate, finite expression of a pre-existing, self-aware entity.
It connects the dots, all the way from the residual heat of the Big Bang to the spark of human insight. The underlying argument is always that the complexity of the effect demands a far superior complexity, or more accurately, an absolute wisdom in the cause. Our rationality always points back to an underlying ultimate wisdom.
A creator who predates the very dimensions of time and space he brought into being.
Precisely.
So we've taken this deep dive through a cosmological analogy, through the unforgiving logic of the principle of sufficient reason, the nature of the antecedent source, and finally this concept of necessary existence, Al-Qayyum. It's a powerful integration of philosophy and theology.
It really is. It provides a structured answer to that fundamental question, why do I think? And as we close, it seems fitting to return to that powerful image they created. The mirror effect.
Right.
We established that our intelligence is just a limited reflection of this infinite, absolute source. So this brings up a final thought for you to contemplate.
Hold on.
The more we realize the limitations and the boundaries of our own finite understanding, the things we can't calculate, the questions we can't answer, the ultimate truth we can't fully grasp, what does that necessary limitation reveal about the boundless original nature of the intelligence that caused the reflection in the first place? It leaves you contemplating the sheer scale of the source that could produce such a profound yet fundamentally limited echo.